the foremost expert on Bitcoin, the guy who's mined the biggest block ever in global blockchain history. Let's give it up for Kurt.
So, I'm Kurt. I do hold a couple of world records in the blockchain space. I'm an infrastructure guy, I'm a software guy, I'm a media guy, entrepreneur guy, some other stuff, but we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, by show of hands, who here really likes systemically bad information? Amen. Good. It's true. We actually love it. This is what makes the world go around. So we're going to learn a little bit about why it makes the world go around and why it'd be better if the world went round for other reasons. Oh, that's me. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Bitcoin, which is mostly false at this point, much like the history of a lot of things that we're all interested in. But in 2008, an unknown entity decided to change the world. It was a couple of years of work, I'm sure, but he put out a white paper saying, hey, I've solved the double spend problem. And for those of you who don't know what the double spend problem is, it's kind of like when we were young and you weren't sure if you had 80 bucks or 90 bucks in your checking account, but you needed to go buy groceries, and you wrote the check and maybe it bounced and you were sorry, but whatever. Nobody uses checks anymore, but the example still mostly works if you've got gray or no hair. And so the double spend problem is essentially that. How do we make sure that the money that we say we have is actually real, such that we can remove friction from global commerce? Now, that's relatively easy in centralized systems. Like now, if you're banking at Bank of America or whatever, and you swipe your debit card and it says, no, you don't have that money, or we know you don't have that money, but we're going to give you 2 days to pay it anyways. Maybe there's an interest fee or something for you. But how do we solve this in a decentralized manner? How do we distribute a monetary system that will solve this problem intrinsically? And so that was the real problem Satoshi Nakamoto sought to solve with Bitcoin here. And he explains why pretty succinctly. This is a clip from the Bitcoin white paper. This is the thesis on what Bitcoin is intended to solve. So commerce on the internet, relying on financial institutions, yada, yada, yada. The cost of mediation increases transaction costs, limiting the minimum practical transaction size, and cutting off the possibility for small, casual transactions. So who here thinks of Bitcoin as a tool for small, casual transactions? A few of us, but generally, if you think of Bitcoin as BTC, I think the fees today are probably $2 or $3. But if you were trying to send stuff, a couple months ago during this ordinals frenzy, it might be $50 a transaction. So that's not small, casual internet business. That's, that's worse than Western Union, frankly. So what happened? Why is this not the case? What transpired here? Well, there was a big argument about what Bitcoin was for and who should control it and what the governance is. And frankly, it's still an argument. People are very unclear as to what Bitcoin is and what it's for and why we use it. I think it's very clear Satoshi Nakamoto wanted to see it distributed as a global payments network for, like he said, his words, small casual transactions. But he talks about lower fraud rate than credit cards and getting into big server farms. Now, that hasn't really happened in the Bitcoin space, at least not at large. In fact, most of the Bitcoin transactions that most people are using are actually running through home nodes that are in people's closets, or in many cases, their mother's closets. And people will treat that as a multi-trillion-dollar value network or some sort of store of value because it's distributed among a bunch of computers. And that's a little bit of a weird way to make this work, especially when, again, Satoshi Nakamoto in, I think this quote is from 2010. Oh yeah, it is, it's dated here. Where he says, giant server farms. Like he's talking about like what we think of when we picture like Amazon Web Services or that kind of thing. Like that's how he pictured Bitcoin. So why are we not there? Frankly, he wanted to undercut Visa. If you look at the world of 2008, if you wanted to do business on the internet, you basically had PayPal and credit cards. There were small regional options for some other things, but generally it was PayPal and credit cards. That's who he was trying to undercut. This is who Satoshi Nakamoto wanted to disrupt. He looked at Visa and said, the hell is this? Came out in the 70s and it's crazy. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And then PayPal shows up and a bunch of idiots took over and they all made billions of dollars, but we didn't disrupt internet commerce. There's still a very practical minimum transaction size of somewhere between $5 and $10, where it just doesn't make sense to use PayPal or Visa or MasterCard or Amex or Discover or anything else if you want to do business on the internet, somewhere between $5 and $10. But there's a lot of business in the world that's happening below $5 and $10. And most of it is not happening. You know, you can go get a slice of pizza on the corner here for $2, or at least it was last time I was here. I don't know with inflation lately, but I don't come to New York every year. But so what do we do about it? That's what he wanted to solve. He looked at the 4 or 5 billion people on Earth who are living on less than $10 a month and saying, well, if we could get all of their business, wouldn't that be novel, right? How many brilliant entrepreneurs are in a third world country and they just don't have any connection to the global economy? Hundreds, thousands, millions. Don't you want to live in a world where the millions of brilliant people aren't stuck in places where they just can't do business with you? That's a killer world. That's what Satoshi wanted to disrupt here. Well, Satoshi basically got kicked out of his own project. A lot of people talk about, oh, Satoshi Nakamoto, this hero. They put up a meme about Satoshi and say, oh, we love this guy. But in reality, if you read his words, the Bitcoin economy of today looks nothing like Satoshi advocated for. And I would encourage you, basically everything Satoshi ever wrote is public information. Almost nobody reads it. But if you read it, it's this incredible treatise about the power of micropayments and making the world a smaller place by connecting people with micropayments. And so he got hijacked out of his own project. Basically, his email accounts got taken over, and then all of his open source repos got taken over. And then it was kind of like, hey, is Satoshi here? Is he gone? Is he dead? Is he whatever? And then you get this sophomore class of people that decided they wanted to take over the project. Basically did, because he didn't have an identity associated with any of this stuff. And so it's like, I don't know, at what point was the Satoshi Nakamoto I was talking to even him or not? And we frankly don't know. At some point between 2012 and 2014, we know that all of his information became compromised, and that was it. It was basically Satoshi disappeared. So this sophomore class of people were very interested in turning Bitcoin into an investment vehicle only, specifically. It's digital gold. It's an asymmetric, think of it as your, whatever. It's your Swiss account for mom and pop, right? Like, hey, you can put $5,000 away and you'll definitely be rich in 10 years. Just do that. Nobody knows. And it's an interesting concept. Not a bad concept. Obviously, it's a very popular idea among a pretty large subset of people who do want or need such services. But it ignored the fact that the real purpose was commerce on the internet and connecting the world through micropayments. But so we had a war, for those of you that are relatively new to Bitcoin, 2015 through, 18. And it's a little bit of a, I'd argue we're still in the middle of that war. So maybe it's Act 2 or Act 3 of the war we're in now. But truly, Bitcoin had a civil war. And the border lines are sort of constantly being redrawn a little bit as these factions of Bitcoin compete with each other. Right now, the most popular idea about Bitcoin is that it's specifically not for payments. Payments are a scam. Just use credit cards. What we need is hard money, and you need to hide that hard money in the basement and whatever. We'll all be rich someday when the dollar collapses, because the dollar has to collapse because fiat money bad. And haven't you heard, the oldest fiat currency only lasted 128 years, whatever the numbers are. But you get these guys out here who are saying, like, look, man, the dollar's definitely going to die. When it definitely dies, you definitely want Bitcoin. So it's like you get this investment thesis. And what everybody knows about a good pitchman with a good investment thesis is there's a lot of mom and pops who are like, I guess I could put a couple $1,000s aside. Maybe we pay off the house sometime. Maybe I actually get to retire and whatever. And that's been the popular meme because it's a very easy meme to sell. The more difficult meme to sell is, hey, what if we disrupt ACH, Wire, FedWire, all your internal banking, Venmo, Swift, Visa, MasterCard, all of these. Like, what if we take on basically every payments company in the world and undercut all of them by a couple orders of magnitude and make it that they either move their business over to our rails or they go out of business? Well, it's difficult. That's extremely disruptive, right? So that's a difficult pitch. So we get the Bitcoin BTC versus BCH versus BSV era that all three still exist. BTC is that, like, hey, it's your digital beanie baby. It's going to be worth $1 million someday. You're gonna wish you never spent it. You got your Bitcoin cashers, which are, I don't even know what they're up to today. It's like 12 guys arguing on the internet about, you know, who can get the most grocery stores to sign up for Bitcoin Cash payments. And you get the BSV people who are who I'm a member of this this tribe, and we are basically breaking world records on a semi-regular basis, showing people that not only is a 1 megabyte block small, so is a 50 megabyte block, and so is a 100 megabyte block, and so is a gigabyte block. I do actually hold the world record for mining the biggest block in the history of all blockchains. Thank you. I'm not here to brag yet. That presentation's next, actually. But we mined a block that had a few million transactions, and it was 4 gigabytes. Everybody said it was impossible. 3 years previously, everybody said anything over 22 megabytes was absolutely mathematically impossible, can't happen, never will happen, or whatever. And now we're, what is it? It's an order of magnitude and a half or something past that, right? So this is what some of the numbers looked like a few years ago when this graph was made. So as a comparison, you can look at what we got here. So global commerce, right? I'm talking about 8 billion people on Earth being able to send each other pennies or dollars. Well, that can't happen at 3 to 7 transactions per second. It can't happen at 150 transactions per second. It also can't really happen at about 2,800 transactions per second, which is what BSV was at when this happened. But now we're up a little bit better. It depends how you calculate transactions per second, obviously, and there's a few theories on the right way to do that. But you'll notice that 1.3 million transactions per second number. There's a pilot going on, has been tweeted by one of the major guys involved in this to AWS, basically Amazon, which is the internet today, right? The internet is Amazon, or Amazon is the internet, sending over 1 million transactions per second between each other in distributed consensus. It's not on live network, but that's the kind of transaction processing that is truly disruptive. By comparison, we can look at Visa, which is the second fastest compared to BSV. Visa's, we've seen in the wild 24,000 transactions per second. The CEO keeps claiming they can do 65,000 transactions per second, but I've never seen the data. So, but it ends up in every Visa report as to what they could do if they really, really needed to. And it just seems, you know, fine, show me, I guess. But yeah, so if we're talking about billions of people being able to do millions of payments, well, we are talking about at some point in the next 6 months, basically being able to do somewhere around 1 million. The number that I was shown was 1.3 million transactions per second, which is basically enough for global micropayment commerce when we get this fully bootstrapped. This is the next generation version of this network technology, completely changed the way that all of this works. But this is the thing that all of our critics said is impossible. Well, we need to have a monolithic node, and it needs to be in your mom's closet because decentralization matters the most. But in the meantime, you know, we've missed out on all this opportunity for everything. I mean, imagine putting, well, we're in New York City. Let's talk about putting every single stock on chain rather than having to go through your broker. What if every single trade could be done through a payment channel that cost you a 10,000th of a penny to open up? You can do high frequency trading for the day. You can settle. You can take ownership of the stock instead of having to have them. Has anybody ever taken delivery of an actual piece of stock? Couple of you, a couple of you I know have, but today, I mean, you ask most people who don't have gray hair, and they'd be like, "How? Why? Is it even possible?" You know, well, it's extremely possible. It could be done for basically free, and it could be cryptographically secure on a global public blockchain if you just utilize this technology. Because all you do is you take your stock certificate, you put it on a token, and you send it to your wallet, where it's yours. Like, you get to keep that. And so all of a sudden NASDAQ and, you know, New York Stock Exchange and all these people are starting to say, all right, well, I guess we better adopt this technology, or else all of a sudden we're like, somebody's going to disrupt us out of Wichita if they figure this out first, right? And so, like, all of these things start to really make people have to compete again. The people that now are like, hey man, I live in my ivory tower, it's great. Now all of a sudden they have to start getting creative. And we really want those people to start getting creative again because they're really good competitors. We know they're good competitors by virtue of the fact that they're in their ivory tower. So what if we had to light a little bit of a fire under their ass again? Like, that's a world I want to live in, where all of a sudden there's a kid in Manila who's competing with somebody on Wall Street, and the guy on Wall Street is getting real nervous about where he's sitting. That's the kind of competition that makes the world a better place, a more fun place, frankly, the kind of place I want to live. Competition is what makes us all better, fitter, happier, healthier. I mean, it's not always fun to compete. It sucks when you lose. But when you lose, that's a big lesson. It makes us all better in aggregate. And if we never did that stuff, we'd still be hunting mammoths and packs or something. I don't know. Also, I am really excited to take questions from the crowd. So if you got burning questions, like I'm gonna cut to questions here in about 5 minutes. So I got a lot of people say, well, what about Ethereum? What about all these other things that everybody loves, right? Well, Ethereum is good for 15 transactions a second, and under pressure, like if you push that 15 transactions a second limit, your fees are upwards of $1,000 a transaction. So who wants to pay $1,000 a transaction in order to use Ethereum? Anybody? Kind of sucks. People will tell you Solana is good for 65,000 transactions a second, but Solana, first of all, Solana isn't actually good at anything. The 65,000 transactions a second number that they use as a benchmark is actually almost completely fake. About 60% of those transactions are about consensus finding. So you only have 40% of that is available for commerce. Is it like 90? Yeah, it's some outrageous number. And it's gone down, last I checked, it was 8 times where the entire network, just like, hey, where's Solana? Is Solana still up? And then it's down in a couple of cases, more than 48 hours. So that's not exactly ready for prime time. Conceptually, they made a ton of compromises in order to hit some crazy benchmark numbers, raised a ton of VC money. So some friends of yours in Miami and San Francisco and Austin definitely wrote checks to these guys, and the product definitely doesn't work. So ask them if they've learned their lesson. So how does this work? Why does it work? Basically, with Bitcoin, the original Bitcoin, which is Bitcoin BSV, you just take the limits off of things. You let the limits be set by the market instead of set by protocol developers. If you let a bunch of engineers decide what the network should look like, they're just going to keep noodling with it until like the most difficult person in the group has made the network look the way he wants it to. And that's really dysfunctional for business. Entrepreneurs don't typically think that way, okay? Entrepreneurs are like, hey man, let's send it out, let's see what comes back. If it drags back any money, like cool, we can reinvest in security or some of these other things. But basically, we have let the network speed and all these things be decided by competition. And when you just give people a tool set and say, here, compete, go for it, what can you do? All of a sudden you go from 3 years ago, oh, 22 megabytes, it's impossible, I can't even conceive of how this is possible. And now a 4,000 megabyte block, like we've had days where this is back to back to back to back, 4 gigabyte blocks, everything's validated, 10-minute block time's fine, difficulty all stays the same. So a year from now, if we're talking 1.3 million, we're talking terabyte sized blocks. So your brilliant engineers of 4 years ago are looking like, these are the guys who were talking about closing the patent office in 1850, right? Well, we've already invented everything, close the patent office, right? So we also have scalable tokens, data services, frictionless digital cash, which is the first obvious thing you do with Bitcoin. It's money. Yeah, so the limits are emergent. What changed? Why is Bitcoin different today in BSV? It's literally just the restoration of Bitcoin the way that it was. We took, what did Bitcoin look like? Let's bring it back, and then let's let it grow organically from there. Standard transactions are another big misnomer. That was a very big box to put things, or a very small box, I guess, to put things in. No more protocol level limits. This was what a Bitcoin node looked like in 2009. All your friends who had laptops and mined 1,000 Bitcoin, like this kind of thing. This is what it looked like. This is what a BTC node looks like today. It's the exact same thing, okay? They have decided all of that. Everybody needs to run their own node. And so everything else about the business model of the BTC blockchain needs to stay small so we can accommodate that. If you want to be that person to accommodate that, not interested. Your typical BSV node today runs in a large data center, probably runs on AWS or runs in some competitor to it. My company specifically has distributed node clusters that do it doesn't exactly look like that. That's obviously a cartoon, but but it's the way that you think about big data. Blockchain is the only space where people say, hey, how do we keep it smaller and make it smaller and make it smaller for the sake of the arbitrary concept of node distribution? And it really just doesn't matter. It's a silly metric. If you've got 3 to 5 major mining pools that are in global data centers, we can disrupt the entire world. Literally tens of trillions of dollars of commerce that we lower the cost of doing business by 99.999x%, and give the entire world the opportunity to compete on a global scale. For me, that's more important than, hey, I want 6,000 cypherpunks to be able to run this on a 12-year-old computer.